Do you believe in the paranormal? Why or why not? I never did before starting my current job, but I do now. I work in an impound yard. We get dozens of wrecked vehicles a day. Some are fatalities. Weird stuff happens in my yard. There was this one fatality that had the airbags drooping down over the windows, but when security walked past, the airbag was stuck up in the door. So he opened the door and let the airbag fall back down. 30 minutes later he's doing his rounds again and the airbag is propped back up again. So he lowers it again and he hears a woman's voice saying, "Don't shut it, it's dark out." Also, there's no attic in the main building, but at night you can hear people walking and talking above the ceiling. The outbuilding has been locked and empty for years, but a light in the upstairs window goes on periodically. Anyone who has worked a night shift at this yard believes in ghosts. I've always been and still am kind of a skeptic, but I did have one experience that made me question things. A cat I had for 8 years passed away in late 2020. Last year, on that exact day, around the exact time of night that he died, I was laying in bed and looking through old pictures of him, when I suddenly felt a weight next to me in the spot he always used to lay in at night. I don't know if thinking about him made my brain recreate that feeling, or if I was tired and hallucinating, or if that little turd really is haunting me and just wanted a quick snuggle, but it felt real as day to me. Last year we brought my baby home from the hospital. That same night my older kids had gotten a horrible bug that gave them a fever. I gave them Tylenol and put them to bed and then went back to go to bed as I was recovering from execution and I was exhausted. I was in the bathroom putting medicine on my dog's ears when my husband walked by and said I needed to check the lock on the window by my daughter. It was a weird thing but I went to do it, and found her asphyxiating on vomit and having a seizure. Her face was purple and she was completely silent. She is alive because I checked that window, and when I asked my husband he had already been in bed. He never asked me to check the window. Yep, but only because I've directly seen lots of things that I absolutely cannot explain away with conventional science, despite really wishing I could. The worst was the haunted as fuck trailer in Montana. Wish I could point it out on a map. I'm sure the family would love to sell it to scientists for study since they can't exactly live in the dang thing. I only slept there because I was homeless and it was cold out. You know that scene in horror movies where nobody is in a kitchen but all the cabinets and drawers are opening and slamming shut? Whole place just going bonkers like the kitchen is having a tantrum? I've seen that in real life. It was normal for that trailer to do that sometimes. Years ago, I moved into an apartment that gave me the creeps because it was what I could afford and there wasn't anything obviously wrong with it. First night there, I finished moving things around and flopped down to rest only to watch in horror as a cup slid across the coffee table all by itself, just like someone sitting on the couch had reached out and pulled their drink closer. I spent the next hour trying to logic that away. Ended up crawling around on the floor looking at the coffee table from different angles and poking at the cup. Couldn't even blame moisture because the cup and table were both dry and the cup had been sitting there for hours. My friend came over to visit, and like you he'd never seen anything paranormal or weird for himself, so when he heard that I had apparently moved into an already occupied apartment he promptly asked if we could poke it with a stick so he could see something inexplicable for himself. Wanted to bring in a talking board. This was not my first rodeo. I'd lived in already occupied places before and fully understood that game of politely sharing space but otherwise leaving each other alone. So I told my friend no, absolutely not, because damn it I just signed a 1-year lease and I'm the one who has to live there. I never did until a paranormal incident happened. I had my daughter in 2008. And not long after, my great-grandmother died at the age of 100 years old. I mourned her, then I moved on. Fasted forward 3 months later, I had a house in Springfield, Missouri. And one night I got up to go to the bathroom, and keep in mind, my daughter's room was down the hall where if the door was open I could see her. As I walked into the bathroom, my daughter's door was open. And what I saw was either creepy or amazing. I saw my dead great-grandmother standing over my daughter's crib. I said, "Big Red?" That's what I called her. Then she turned around, ran towards right into my face, kissed me on my cheek, then faded away. This actual happened, because I remember being awake. I did paranormal investigation for years. I was paid to do the audio and video as well as making tech needed to find the paranormal, like electromagnetic and hotspot detectors. I've seen a lot of unexplainable things in my time. One paranormal confirming experience in particular was in a hidden graveyard for children that died in a flood after a flash flood hit their schoolhouse. During the investigating, the toys on the graves would jump between different graves, children laughing was heard, and deep blue dancing lights that looked like they were playing were seen all over. Pretty much everyone that I take to see this in Miami experiences something. I think it's arrogant to believe that our human intellect is the acme of all understanding. I say yes, I do believe in the paranormal because I have had a number of experiences, very few, to be sure, that tip my scales of belief toward there being more to this world than can be measured or quantified or calculated within current human understanding. And one thing that I actually did measure. I suspected that a certain attic area of a very old school building that I used to work at was haunted. I decided to put it to the test. So the year was 2001. I was working as a music and art teacher in a little Catholic elementary school that was built before 1920. Lots of spooky stuff went on in that building after hours. I can tell lots of stories. The story I'm bringing to you now has to do with an attic-type storage room above the school's third-story theater. There was this tiny storage area that was an absolute treasure trove with about 100 years worth of artifacts and memorabilia. I was sorting through it one day when I ran out of steam. Long story short, while I was treasure hunting, and I came across this collection of photographs from probably about the 1940s or 1950s. Now I know that I am skipping over a whole lot, but so much weird stuff had already gone down, that this place already gave me the heebie-jeebies. I thought something was up. I decided to put my suspicions of the paranormal to the test. There is a thick stack of maybe 2 or 3 dozen photographs. They were all photographs of a parish picnic. All of them in black and white, all of them had those zigzag, pinking shears edges. I had already experienced objects being found in places where I hadn't left them. It had gotten to a point where it was a little much, a little far-fetched, to keep talking up the finding of objects in weird places to my own misplacement, or somebody else moving them. Here's where I made my experiment. First of all, I was the only able-bodied person on staff. You had to climb a rickety ladder to get where I was to begin with. I was the only one that was not 90 years old or 200 pounds. I was the only one able to climb up that ladder who had a key to the building. Second, I conducted this experiment on a whim. I set it when it was twilight about 8 p.m. I checked on it at 6:30 a.m. the next day. Third, I told nobody what I did. So what should I do? I took the stack of photos. I looked through all of them. I put my favorite picture, it was of a group of young men, posing and looking tough and adorable, on the top. I even marked it on the back with the word top. I laid the photos in a very neat stack in the corner of the attic/storage room area, with a brick on top. I came back in the wee hours of the next morning. I found the stack of photos, you bet I did. But they were not in the corner. The brick was in the corner, but the photos were in a very neat stack in the center of the room. The top photo was a picture of a bunch of old ladies. I have run through every explanation I can think of. The least far-fetched requires belief in the paranormal. No. There's no evidence from thousands of years of a civilization that want to believe in life after death. I did have a creepy dream experience though. About 17 years I was around 13 and I was in the Scouts. We did this which was a rare but exciting thing. There was about 20 of us from 12 to 18 and we hiked to a cabin in the woods to stay the night. We followed this trail called the Beverly 20 miles, so we were knackered. Late at night/early morning it suddenly started banging. It was like 50 people were outside banging against the walls. And we were in the middle of nowhere. Understandably it freaked us all out, but I remember kind of being excited too. It was intermittent for about an hour and stopped. One by one we all needed a piss and the toilet block was 100 meters away and nobody wanted to go. So we all decided we'd go together and leave together. We're in the toilet block and suddenly the light shatters and the door slams shut. We're all in pitch black and fumbling for torches, flashlights. Some of us outside and some of us inside. I was outside and we didn't shut it and it would have been hard to slam it shut from the inside without anyone seeing. And it was a really still summer night with no wind. We legged it back to the cabin and the light came back on the toilets as we were running away. But we talked and all heard the bulb go. None of us slept that night. And the creepiest thing was that when talking to my grandma about places I'd camped a few years later, she mentioned that a guy who used to play on my granddad's rugby team hung himself in the cabin we were sleeping in years before. She don't have an explanation for anything that happened that night. There's plenty of plausible explanations. A bunch of people could have decided to randomly bang on the walls of a cabin in the middle of nowhere and disappear. One of us could have smashed the light and screwed a new one in when we were all freaked out. But nothing I've ever come up with seems plausible. But I'm not going to say it's ghosts because no evidence supports that. Still freaky though. I do. But the craziest thing I ever saw was bartending at an old tin ceiling bar. Weird haunting stuff had happened, like bottle caps being thrown at people in the back when no one was there, or hearing people run up the stairs. But one night I was closing and my ex-husband was there, having a couple of drinks. I was counting my till. Just for context, I am Hindu and didn't grow up with the same visual ideas of what a ghost or demon would look like as in the West. Also, I worked at this bar for over 10 years, knew every shadow, glimmer of light and so forth. I saw this ink black shadow thing move way across the room to my left. It was big and just swooped through quickly. I saw my ex's eyes go to it, but he kept talking, and I just chalked it up to being tired. But then right in front of me, like 10 feet away, it slowly swooped across the room. Like demon smoke from a movie, which is something I never believed in. My ex clearly saw it too, and I asked, "Did you just see that?" And he said he did and described it. So we both saw it. It wasn't an actual shadow, it seriously looked like something out of a movie. After that, I wouldn't close by myself anymore. Either he'd come down or I'd buy a kitchen guy a drink or the closing server. Not me, but me and my brother used to live in this really old house. It was 140 plus years old, so obviously some weird shit went on and on and on. One time my brother was coming upstairs at like 12 at midnight, and in the corner of his eye saw a woman in a nightgown staring at him. One time my dad saw a figure of a man in a hat standing at the edge of his bed, also staring at him. Another time my sister had a cold and went to ask my mom to make her tea. It was around midnight as well, so my mom was heading downstairs and saw a woman in a nightgown, same as before, standing behind-ish, a doorway so you could see part of the bottom nightgown and her leg. Glad we moved out of that place. I've had paranormal experiences, while suffering through severe mental illness. It was very informative, in hindsight. I feel like mental illness can create experiences drawn from popular culture, so that, say, if you're religious, your hallucination may manifest in you having a conversation with God. But I strongly suspect mental illness was the cause of the first paranormal experience. Psychology is a very recent field. People in the past would assume something more external, like ghosts, the afterlife, demons, etc. So, no. I don't believe in the paranormal. I think this is just all in our head, and the source of it all is a long heritage of collective consciousness, from our ancestors trying to rationalize it without knowledge of psychology. Yes. There are millions of ghost stories. Every single person that has seen a ghost can't be a liar. So that means some of the stories must be legitimate. I've read accounts by entire squads of American soldiers that experienced paranormal phenomena. Not one person telling a story, but encounters corroborated and retold among a group. What would be their motivation to lie? Especially collectively as a group. Especially soldiers. I think the common concept of what a ghost is, trapped deceased person, isn't correct. Why no happy ghosts ever? But I think we're getting closer and closer to being able to tangibly measure a phenomenon that we as a species are not ready to understand. Imagine the impact globally when the concepts of heaven and hell are destroyed. The confirmation of an afterlife. Or possibly the realization that we are some type of simulation. That ghosts are literally glitches in our matrix. They don't have to be lying. Our senses aren't nearly as foolproof as we think they are. It's no coincidence that the time period when people were burning carbon monoxide releasing oil lamps in poorly ventilated homes, they also started reporting all the signs of carbon monoxide poisoning. AKA headaches, nausea, dizziness, confusion and hallucinations. They just thought that was ghosts. There's even the Bugs Bunny effect, where you can plant false memories in people. A bunch of exhausted soldiers all get told a ghost story at the time and they could swear it happened to them years later. That's entirely believable. 19Hz is known as the fear frequency because it's below the range that humans can hear, infrasound, but causes people that hear it to experience the feelings of fear and dread. It should also be noted that tigers can growl at 19Hz. I have to say that this is a difficult conclusion that I've only come to realize after 30-some years of experience. I'm a natural skeptic and trust in science to deliver the answer. When it comes to verifying the existence of the paranormal, you require very specific results within a given circumstance, in which you need to isolate the incident from any other possible explanation. You also need to have a substantial amount of these incidents or results to accept it as true. And sure, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, it would be very difficult to mark anything paranormal as true, without having some natural explanation or explained as a fraudulent case. Back then all we could do was sit on the mystery and try to find causes to explain what happened logically in a normal, natural setting. But in this day and age where there are more ghost/cryptid sightings than before and the people reporting by documenting them on the internet, it's becoming more and more difficult to disprove these kinds of videos. Sure, one can argue it is still possible to fabricate these videos, but the amount of effort needed to create these videos would require a lot of time, money and skill, something that most of us just can't afford to do. And people who post these videos go out of their way now to show they are not joking. And again, the sheer number of these videos alone says that these incidents are happening everywhere. And some of these videos are simply beyond explanation. Therefore, my conclusion is, in short, that while I cannot prove that ghosts, demons, cryptids or otherwise specifically exist, I believe there is some abnormal energies that are beyond our normal realm of existence. So is it paranormal? I'm putting money on yes. Not in the way people mean when they ask that. People experience stuff, I'm not saying they don't, it's just not, ghosts and shit. I experienced some spooky shit myself when I was younger, and the common factor was always that I was scared, that it was spooky. It was in that building's spooky bare basement that was being refinished, or on the side of the highway at 2 a.m. when I had to pee between stops, or when I was completely alone in my house's basement, or at midnight after having a dream in that house my family moved into that none of us were happy about. But here's the thing, all that spooky shit? It stops when instead of giving in to that little tingle in the back of your neck, you throw your arms wide and tell it to fight you. It stops when you try to touch it, see it, understand it, record it, or explain it. It just stops. Because it isn't real. People who have lived in that one spooky old house that they know was haunted because they'd see things at night or something would open door and mess with doorknobs don't ever set up cameras or motion sensors or, hell, just sleep with the lights on. People who hear people talking in the walls don't try to record it. Because it's just reaction. That is the phenomena. The paranormal is people's poor attempt to rationalize experiences that are the result of gaps in knowledge or quirks of our biology/psychology as external rather than internal phenomena. I've yet to experience or be presented with evidence which suggests otherwise in any meaningful sense. I always thought, it is a possibility, but I had never experienced anything which struck me as a paranormal event. My mother passed about 7 years ago, and when my father was alive, he passed from COVID 2 years ago. When my father was alive after my mother died, he would tell me stories of hearing the bathroom door open and the toilet flush every day at 7 a.m. One day I got off the phone with my dad and he had shared another story of my mom walking around and so forth. That evening I was in bed playing a video game on my tablet. All of the sudden, off to my right, just 2 inches away from my shoulder, a cold spot formed, and I could feel the cold air coming from the spot. It felt like I had opened the freezer door, and the cold air you feel, but bone cold. At this time, it was early summer and the AC was not running and the house was at 72 degrees, and so I know the cold spot was not the AC or anything. The cold spot lasted about 30 seconds and then was gone. I just asked the question, "Is this you, Mom? Are you here?" All of the sudden I felt an impression in the bed next to my right leg, as if someone had sat down. I just spoke out and said, "If this is you, Mom, you're more than welcome here in my home." After that, I have never had another visit. When my dad was in the hospital dying of COVID, he looked over and said, "It is time for me to go see you, Mother," and the way he said it, it was like she was there waiting for him. He took out the oxygen, smiled and left. Absolutely yes. When I was 11, I went to Manila to visit my mom's family. They went out shopping and I was left at my aunt's house alone. In the room upstairs, as I was eating Pringles on the bed, I dropped one. When I went to pick it up, it shot under the bed and came back out half gone. Chalked it up to rats or something because, well, it wasn't exactly the living conditions of America. Spooked out though, I decided to sit on the staircase where I could still see the TV but have some sort of escape plan. Lol. On the corner of my eye, in the adjacent room, I see a dark figure pacing back and forth. I just slowly went downstairs and pretended it never happened. Now as a kid, I've had my fair share of imagining large furniture as dark shadows, but I shit you not, I saw what I saw in broad daylight. Second instance that happened was in my home at 17. I didn't necessarily see anything, but at night while sleeping, I'd have horrible dreams of some lady trying to pull me away from my body. It felt like I couldn't breathe and just felt weird, like I was under the influence or something, just extremely weak. This happened periodically, but I assumed I was just having nightmares. One day my boyfriend came over and we took a nap. When he got up to grab something to eat, I went to take a quick shower. He stayed in the living room and was surprised to see me come out the bathroom because he just had walked past my room and saw me laying in bed still. My room also had this eerie little door that you could open to this extremely tiny room, but I kept it shut with a dresser against it to completely close it off. One day a couple weeks after this incident, I ask my nephew why don't they like to stay the night with us, and he tells me, he doesn't like the girl in my closet. Spooked me bad lol. After we moved away, I never had those dreams again. At 19, I moved in with my husband. One night I wake up and I hear footsteps down the hall. We lived with his dad at this point and his dad usually stayed up late, so I didn't think anything of it. I try to close my eyes and go to sleep, but then I hear the footsteps come in the room. Door was closed and never opened, and the steps seemed to walk around the bed. Woke up the next day and went to the kitchen, all the cabinets and drawers were open. That was it though, but it freaked me out. Last memorable instance, I was now 22 living with my husband in our first home together. I was a stay-at-home mom and was alone at home with our kid. I kept hearing a child crying outside. I went out back to check around but couldn't see anything. But kept hearing it. We lived on base housing, so I assumed it was just thin walls. The next day when we wake up and come downstairs, all our drawers and cabinets were open once again. I'm 30 now, and just this year we've had our front door magically open at 1 in the morning. Camera picked it up, but front camera and living room camera didn't show any body, until we discovered it upon waking up, as well as our camera inside repeatedly saying wake up in a child's voice. Different day though. I've just accepted it by now, lol. While I can say each of these instances can be explained logically, it's just too much of a coincidence for me to confidently 100% say paranormal activity doesn't exist. I had a full-on poltergeist when I was 12. Other people saw things. The scariest was the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. They would just black out all of a sudden, and it would feel like either you were rushing up at the ceiling or it was rushing down at you. My friend saw it and never slept over again. Years later, I was making props for a haunted house. I saw a cast member lean out of the door. I said hi and went back to work. 20 minutes later, the same cast member pulled up. I asked why he didn't say hi back. He hadn't been there that day but thought it was his dad's ghost. That looked just like him and loved that haunted house. Oh my god, I have so many stories. I've seen heavy sliding doors open by themselves. The most recent post on my account has a photo I took and a story, but I'll tell a different one here. I worked at a fast food restaurant that is popular for its yellow arches. I was a barista, and honestly my advice is don't work there, but that's not the point. I had a 7 to 10 p.m. shift, so it was short and I was by myself. This particular restaurant had the counter and kitchen in a separate side of the restaurant from the cafe, where you had to lean over the counter to see the other place if you wanted to. I was alone in the cafe and the other staff couldn't see me unless they came over or looked through the cameras. We weren't busy, so I was doing my closing jobs when I heard a woman screaming outside. It was like she was screaming for dear life. This is a heavily populated area with no wild animals that could make that sound. I look around and don't see any customers concerned and assume I'm hearing things. This isn't unusual, and I haven't been diagnosed with anything that could cause this, but often when I am alone I hear things like footsteps that aren't actually there. I have never heard voices in my life, but considering no one else was concerned and I have a slight history of auditory hallucinations, I shrugged it off and got back to work. I finished my packing up job, so I started polishing the stainless steel cabinets under the counter. My back was facing the cafe entrance and I was below the toaster when I heard a man's voice say sorry, and automatically turned to say all good, assuming a coworker had come in and was asking me a question or something, saying like sorry to bother you, but no one was there. I stood up and checked over the counter to see if I had just overheard a customer talking, even though I heard it right behind me, but there were no customers in the store anymore. The next morning I was talking to my coworker about how I was hearing things and told her what happened, laughing at myself. She didn't laugh, she looked a bit shocked. She told me that 2 of my managers had separately told her they had seen a ghost around the toaster. For a while I thought the ghost must have played a prank on me and felt bad, so apologized, but I was telling my friend this story recently and she said she more assumed he was apologizing for someone else's actions. Yes. I have seen and experienced a few things after my parents got their first house. I used to see 2 shadow-type figures. The only features I could make out were their eyes. It used to sound like someone was walking on the stairs at night, and as of last year, the living room TV has started turning on with the volume all the way up at random during the night. I'm not sure if there's a weird setting or update doing, but it freaks everyone out. Our back porch light has also been turned on during the middle of the night. If it wasn't for our alarm system, I'd think someone was in the house messing with us, but it never went off when those things occurred. I've had some weird experiences. One time me and my best friend took pictures in his backyard for a school project. We were going to try to edit ourselves into a different background, using paint or whatever. When I got home he messaged me he was scared and had something to show me. The next day he brought prints of 2 of the original images to school. You could see 2 girls vaguely in the background on one, then the same girl in a slightly different spot on the other one. This was very early so Photoshop wasn't widely spread as it is today. First I thought he was messing with me, but he was genuinely scared. He didn't want to go in the backyard again and he deleted all those pictures. When I was a teen, me and my mom lived in a very old house in the city. It was narrow with lots of stairs. Going up the stairs I always turned the light on and ran because I felt something following me. I know that's just a feeling, but I'm adding it in because in later apartments I had zero fear in the dark. It was that place. One night I couldn't sleep and I was tossing and turning. I was laying on my side and my sheets didn't fully cover me. Suddenly I felt something tickle my back leg. It wasn't gentle but quite firm. It felt like someone dropped a massive spider on my leg, which I thought because I have a fear of spiders. I literally jumped out of bed so fast, my heart was racing. I was genuinely startled. Turned the sheets inside out, nothing. Door closed, window closed. I also had what I think was an out-of-body experience there. It was very similar to sleep paralysis, but the thing was, while I could feel myself laying on the bed not being able to move, I was also standing in my room looking at myself laying on the bed. Two perspectives. I swear I was walking around and even opened the window, which was in fact closed but opened when I woke up. I was then jolted back into my body and could move again. My mom also started sleepwalking while we lived there, and she told me later that she often had dreams of floating on the ceiling. I remember the attic. It had no door, but it was pitch black. One time I went up there with some friends to shoot a video for school, and it was just ridden with orbs. Just a really scary place. To finish off maybe a more wholesome story. When my dad died, he wanted his ashes to be scattered in our city's river. It was a really cloudy gray day. The moment he was put to water, the clouds opened up and there was a rainbow across the river, right above my office building. It was gone again a few minutes later. I've been feeling down the last few months and asked my dad for a sign, and sure enough, I saw a rainbow 15 minutes later, also gone after a few minutes. I've believed in the paranormal for as long as I can remember. I've always had a feeling that the human body is a vessel, and when we die, our physical bodies obviously won't work anymore. But that doesn't mean our soul and energy that we left behind didn't. I feel that energy is eternal. If someone dies in their house or a place where they were very attached, that energy always stays. It kinda embeds itself into the environment. I hope that made some kind of sense, lol. I also had my first paranormal experience at the age of 12-13. I guess I have always believed that various entities that we cannot see are around us. I was always fascinated by haunted places, and I worked at the Masquerade in Atlanta. The place was a cotton mill that burned down, and all the workers were trapped inside. I saw some seriously unexplainable shit. Luckily, my friend also saw and heard things. I stayed in Al Capone's room in Tennessee that is supposedly haunted. You have to ask for the room and they are hesitant. I can't explain what happened there, except my 2-year-old daughter was straight up talking to someone. It was surreal. Anyway, I have to put my science aside for this. Basically, I have no fucking clue, but I also used to break into closed down psychiatric hospitals that used all sorts of deprivation for photography. The best part was in one of the corridors that span a mile or so underground. I walked into a destroyed bathroom and saw someone talking a shit, or so I thought. Some fucker taped jeans and shoes to the toilet. That was terrifying. No. I've never seen anything remotely paranormal in nearly 40 years of life, and have never been told about a paranormal encounter that didn't have reasonable alternative explanations. It is far more probable that people are misinterpreting their senses, experiencing confusion or hallucinations, or falling prey to bias, seeing what they want or have been taught to be real, than that allegedly paranormal things that can never be definitively proven are real. I'm not saying it's impossible for ghosts, demons, monsters, etc. to exist, just that it's highly improbable and far less probable than human error, which is something that can be proven to happen all the time. The day I experience something that has no reasonable alternative explanation, which includes my own brain being wonky, which is something I have no trouble accepting, is the day I will believe in the paranormal. But only that one thing. The fact that I really, honestly saw a Sasquatch or whatever doesn't prove that ghosts etc. exist, too. I haven't lived long enough, but when I was starting school I used to sense and see things that weren't there in the corner of my eye at places, and I still do now. In the third house I lived in, I've moved many houses. I would say I was about 6-7 years old, and there's one thing that I will always remember about this house to the day I die. Keep this in mind, I had about 4 pets, 2 dogs and 2 cats at the time, and every night when I went to sleep I would turn my lamp off and my parents would shut my door, which is probably what almost every kid would normally do. This one night I'm by myself and my parents had already gone to bed, and my door was shut and my lamp was still on. Laid down, turned the lamp off and then try falling asleep. Somewhere halfway through the night I get a soft nudge at my foot of bed. I look up and at the foot of my bed I see a large-sized dog that looked like a cross between a Labrador and a Husky with red eyes staring straight at me. It couldn't be my other dogs because the door was closed, and they are both Stoffies, which are short dogs but also big, like the size of the gray dog from Lady and Tramp. This dog is just sitting at the end of the bed and staring straight into my soul. I fall as fast asleep as I can, and the next morning I wake up and the door is still closed like the night before. I tell my parents and they don't believe me and say it was probably just a dream, which to this day they still joke about now. Last year during my mother's birthday we got her a dog to replace her dog that does due to tumor in 2021 a week before my birthday. A couple of weeks mom finds out what the cross of the breed is, a Labrador and Husky, and it's fully black, and gives mom and I soft nudges all the time like it wants something. Is this just a coincidence or not? The house we live in now is the house we moved in after that house, and many weird things happen where the power randomly switches off and the TV turns on in the middle of the night when everyone is asleep, and I always sense like something is watching me in my room 24/7. We live out of town now, so it's a lot more quieter and peaceful, but from the beginning something has always been up with house for the fact this house has also been moved from a different town about 2 hours away. I'd if you believe me, but these things have really happened. I do, because of something that happened as a kid. I was about 6 asleep in my room. I remember waking up and seeing a woman walk into my doorway and peer into my room. But I wasn't scared. I remember getting the feeling that I would get when my parents checked on me. She looked around and then walked into my parents' room, which was next to mine. The next morning I told my mom, who thought I was telling a fib. Until I described my grandmother, her mother, perfectly, to her favorite brown sweater, clogs, her favorite shoe, and her long hair, down her back. My grandmother passed away 5 years before I was born. There were no photos of her in the house or at relatives. I had no idea about her really. I remember telling my mom and thinking I did something wrong because she started crying. January 2021. Freshman year of high school, just out of the pandemic. It was a Monday, so rather than going to school, I was seated in the kitchen, under the lights, at my laptop, attending Google Meets. That was until third period, concert choir. There was no way to really do choir virtually, so my teacher just took attendance and let us go, giving me 40 minutes to sit back, relax, and prepare for Spanish. So there I am, on my phone in the den, flipping through the internet. Mom's at the family PC, filling out forms so we could get vaccinated for the virus, and Dad's in the living room playing some of his PS2 war games. Suddenly, the dog starts barking at the lights, and as I go to ask what's wrong, the light bulb just above my laptop bursts. Mind you, the lights were off, and had been off for over an hour. I didn't really believe my parents about the ghosts living in our home, but I sure do now. No. Where are all the ghosts of dinosaurs and flies and stuff? Why only ever humans or pets? And why can spirits only communicate in riddles and odd hints? And those who can apparently communicate with the dead call if a gift, so why do they charge you money for the messages? Gifts are free. They charge because they are con artists. There is no soul. Living organisms are a meat bag with chemical reactions and electrical impulses firing. These create what we call consciousness. Once the firing of those neurons stops, the consciousness is gone. That's it. We are back in the same place as we were before conception. I do experience some paranormal stuff, like toys starting to make noise. In front of my room is a kid's playground where my nephews keep their dolls and stuffed animals and toys. It was that day where I heard noises from a doll outside of my room. I checked the time, and it was 4 a.m. in the morning. The battery is dying, but it was squeaking so creepy that I covered my head with blanket and tried to get to bed. Another incident that I encountered was around 2 years ago when every student used Zoom for classes. I was on a class online and I heard a noise like chicken clucking at around 1 p.m. It went for a long time, like 40 minutes long, before I decided to go out and check for the noise. I walked out, heard no noise, then headed back and I heard the noise again. I decided to take a video of it because it was damn dark and creepy. One of the toys got switched on somehow, and it was glitching with random noises. I was home alone in both incidents and they were both creeped me out. However, I don't believe in paranormal stuff for some reasons. Absolutely. I was a little child when my mother went to a psychic. She told her, "You will get a new car soon." My mom had no idea what she meant, and I remember her talking about it in the living room with my grandma. At the time I was just a little shrimp lol, a small child. No one was going to discuss the psychic's predictions with me. But I listened to them talking about it with big eyes and big ears. A few months later, in the main road, a speeding van crashed into us, destroying our whole car. Luckily, we had escaped injury, but the whole car was shriveled up. Especially the front part was gone. My mom was forced to buy another car. There were other predictions as well. I haven't had the encounter that many others have had that would make me a believer, so to say. However, I've experienced a few strange things here and there, and I've always kept an open mind to these things. Science is weird, and many things have gone unexplained. My latest strange occurrence happened at my current airport job, which I work the night shift. That night, it was just myself and one other coworker of mine. After we finish our mandatory tasks for the night, we have tons of downtime, and we usually spend it sleeping. My coworker had gone to another room in the building while I stayed in the line shack. I had the lights off and was about to doze off when I heard the door creak open slowly, shut, then the weight of someone or something resting on the chair across from me. I thought nothing of it, assumed it was my partner, and continued to rest my eyes for about 15 minutes. I didn't hear anything else in those 15 minutes. I then decided to open my eyes and was even prepping a greeting to my partner when I noticed I was all alone. There was no one there. I'll admit, I was a bit spooked, but maybe I was just tired. About 7 years ago or so I lived in a house in the middle of nowhere and my brother and I had some really scary experiences. Whenever I would get up from my bed after laying down, my closet door would open and this tall wolf-like creature would come out and push me on the floor and he would cut up my clothes. I couldn't scream, but after about 15 minutes or so my mom would come in and the wolf would be gone, but I would be on the floor with ripped up clothes and I would be crying hysterically. And this went on every night and every morning, so much so that I was afraid to go into my closet. There were a few times where I would go down into the basement and the wolf would be there and he would talk to me about just how he was gonna rip me up in the night. My brother on the other hand would see this old woman who was very ghost-like and would just wander around the house and would watch him on the foot of his bed. After we moved from this house, all the bad shit stopped and everything was back to normal. After living in the new house for about a week, I googled my old house and apparently some guy murdered his wife there and they were buried under the house. Do you know what they call paranormal things that are real? Physics. When it comes to things like ghosts, there are at least two solid arguments against them. 1. Thermodynamics. Where does the energy come from to make them work? 2. Genetics. There is a common claim that ghosts exhibit something of the personality they had in life. If this were true, then we could expect people to evolve over thousands of years to leave ghosts who would help their close genetic relatives. This almost could not happen. Imagine two families. One has genes that create human personalities that, when they become ghosts, have a minuscule better chance to be kind to family, the other doesn't. Over thousands of years, the family with the imperceptibly friendly ghost will do slightly better, ghosts looking out for them, even if only a little. The family without the friendly ghost does average, or even slightly worse if the ghost is mean to family. Compound that tiny advantage over thousands of years and it would build to a real advantage. The good ghost genes will spread through the population, just as other genes do that confer slight advantages over long periods of time. Eventually, most ghosts will be helpful to close genetic relatives. We don't see that. TL, Doctor, if human personality persists into their ghost form, humans ought to evolve to form ghosts who help close genetic relatives. We don't see that. I do, because I have spoken with some of the most rational people I know and heard some accounts that are tough to explain. One of these accounts is from one of my own parents and corroborated by their sibling. I appreciate that many are committed to being 100% logical and believe that everything has an explanation. I get the need to live in a world with certainties like that. I just don't think that's the case, and by varying degrees many people do experience paranormal or supernatural phenomena. No. Most people barely understand what psychological bias and placebo is. I'm not surprised there are millions of ghost stories. The more ignorant a person is, the more seriously they take themselves. After all, our emotionality and psyche can be extremely vulnerable. False memories are a thing. We like to exaggerate periods of stress we misunderstood. False awakenings can be really powerful dreams. Semi-lucid dreams can also be really powerful, and if stress is a big enough part of life, be or be not the individual aware of it, it can easily turn into a false memory. It's extremely convincing too, for the people in question. Audiophiles know what they hear just like these people know what they saw, when in reality both are clueless. I wonder how many people that have had paranormal experiences also were maybe on the brink of developing PTSD or similar. I didn't, until I discovered the proof that ghosts do exist. It was a Saturday night, I was sleeping, then I heard strange noises. Sounded like a voice, but it didn't speak. I think the noise was in my mother's room. I was too scared that night to go check. In the morning, the noises stopped. I talked to my mother about this, but she acted like she didn't hear anything. That was strange. Then I entered my mother's room and guess what? There was ectoplasm just everywhere. The same kind of sticky liquid you can see in Ghostbusters. I collected a sample and will soon make analysis to the nearest laboratory. I think I got a proof that ghosts are real, guys. No, because there's no evidence and no logical reason to, and no matter what I try to do, have a ghost or a demon or a whatever actually contact me, they never want to show up. It's more than a coincidence that they only seem to supposedly show up for people who already believe that these things exist. I've reached out to random people from different communities to cast hexes and spells and whatever on me to send me some kind of paranormal entity, and I've had nothing show up. No, I have some stories, but they're explainable. While living alone, I lived in a basement. It was fine, I liked it. No issues. But I work overnights and it was my day off, so being up at 3 a.m. was normal for me due to my adjusted sleep schedule. Resident Evil 8 just came out and I'm playing it at 3 a.m. and am at the part where the baby hallucination shows up. I heard a huge crash in real life in the bathroom. The mirror fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. Upon inspection, it was a thin mirror that was glued to the walk. The glue must have finally given out, which makes sense because I had just taken a shower and the fog probably helped melt the glue. Cleaned the mirror and continued my playthrough. Yes, I do believe them, this being because I have had an encounter with them a handful of times when I was young. One time was when I was around the age of 7 or 8. I lived in Philippines in a pretty ran-down house in Manila City. There was only 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, and an abandoned kitchen that we didn't use since we blocked it off. There was probably 10 of us in that house and we slept on a very thin mattress, probably 2 inches thick, and flattened cardboard boxes. I slept on the cardboard since I didn't really because there wasn't really a big difference. I don't truly know when it started happening, but I think it was just half a year or so since I moved in because my mom was abroad studying. Anyway, I began to start waking up under the dining table that was only separated by a shelf. I first thought that I was just a really movie sleeper or that I slept walk. But then it happened for a week, then I thought that one of my uncles just kept putting me under there to joke around. I asked them about it and they said that they weren't doing it, but I was still suspicious of them, until one night. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, probably between 12 to 3 a.m. to get water. But as I was about to get up and go to the dining room/kitchen to get water, I saw a white, floating, figure of a woman go through the door of the blocked-off kitchen. I immediately laid back down and covered my entire body with my blanket and acted like I was asleep. Not even 10 seconds later I was lifted into the air. I vividly remembered how I didn't feel its touch, only a shiver went down my spine as I was gently laid on the cold tiled floor under the dining table. The next morning I immediately told my uncles, grandma, and great-grandpa about the event. They all believed me since that particular house was rumored to be the most haunted in the neighborhood because of its history. After that day I never woke up under the dining table again, but other weird things has happened in that house to me and other members of my family. I have a handful more of stories to tell, but this comment will probably look like a 20-page essay after I've told all of the more significant ones. All my life I've had relatives claiming supernatural occurrences has happened to them. I've never seen anything. I have had OBEs though, so I am wholly convinced that there is much more than just physical life that we just don't understand. But ghosts and goblins? No. Zombies though, I see them every day, looking at their iPhones. Yes, I had many encounters with the paranormal, like one time I was at my grandma's house. I was going to sleep but my grandma's cat came up on my bunk bed, look in to rift and starts meowing and looking up at the roof, so me and my cat are scared as hell and then go upstairs, and my jerkwad most of the time sister doesn't believe me. I bought a detached house opposite an older guy at work's terraced house. He was adamant I were to let him keep his car in my garage, which I very politely refused. From the day I bought it he talked down to me at every opportunity till one day he were really bad in front of a dozen men at work, so I blanked him from then on. I had a fleeting thought that went through my mind that I wouldn't even speak to him even if his only son died in a car crash. A year later, you guessed it, paranormal or what? This tale is 100% true, I promise.